Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this Pricing Hub webinar. We are now live, and we're going to wait a couple of minutes before we start so people can join. Right now, we are 10 in the webinar, and we're expecting a bit more people. Just meanwhile, we wait for people. I've shared in the chat, I don't know if you guys see that, an interesting study about the impact of delivery fees and delivery experience on the customer experience. And it's a study that says that basically 40% of the customers with a 1-star review have put this review because of a poor experience on delivery. So delivery is a key topic, whether it is for the customer experience and the customer satisfaction or in terms of conversion. So today we're going to debate specifically on the conversion side. Okay, let's 32. I think we should start. So let's get cranking. Welcome to this webinar again. Today the topic is how to optimize your additional services in terms of pricing, and what is the data-driven approach that we should be putting in place in order to maximize whatever KPIs you want to maximize. I'm here today, so my name is Jerome, I'm the co-founder of Pricing Hub, and I'm here today with Guillaume, my partner. He's our CPO and pricing expert. Guillaume, could you introduce yourself in a few words?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. Glad to have you on board. At Pricing Hub, I'm in charge mostly about product and customer management, and my background has been mostly on the travel industry, where I worked in Europe and in the US on dynamic pricing and revenue management in different companies, Amadeus and eDreams ODGO to name the last ones.
Thanks, Guillaume. So here today, we're going to be chatting with Guillaume, and basically I'm going to ask the questions and Guillaume is going to answer them, but you need to be involved. So you will have the ability to ask all your questions, and you have on the right hand side of your screen a place where you can ask all your questions. You can upvote for your questions so we can prioritize them at the end. So don't hesitate to ask question, upvote question. Then during the webinar, I'm going to be asking some poll questions, so little short surveys that I will be commenting. So don't hesitate to answer to those poll questions on the run. So it's going to animate a bit the conversation, right? And we really count on you on the fact that ask whatever questions you need. We're going to speak for 30 minutes, and afterwards we're going to do the 15 minutes QA session. Okay. A couple of words to introduce Pricing Hub and who we are, because you guys don't know us. So our mission at Pricing Hub is to help retailers and e-commerce players to protect their margin, and we want to do that by putting the consumers and your customers at the center of the price optimization. What we do figure out and see a lot is that pricing decisions in retail are too much often centered on the competition. Competition is obviously important. It's important to understand the price sensitivity of your consumers, and this is our core business. We help you optimize your prices using obviously our pricing expertise and also our methodology, and we package all this in a very simple SaaS solution, super actionable, very simple to use, and you don't have to be a pricing expert to use our SaaS solution. We help retailers with physical stores, but we also help e-commerce players, and we do that delivering a very strong ROI. We work on different use cases. The main use case is elasticity measurement, but also helping you to deploy your pricing strategy and your pricing optimization. We focus a lot on automation, but we do have also the ability to work in a SaaS plus hands-on type of execution on specific use cases, such as delivery fees and overall any additional services optimization. But we also help you understand price sensitivity. We can help you analyze your competitive data, etc. So there are many use cases we can help you with. They're all pricing related, so feel free to reach to us If you have any pricing topics, I think we can help you. Last thing, when we speak about purely pricing optimization, you need to understand that our SaaS solution is here to, walk you through a learning curve. So you can optimize with us your pricing using very simple pricing rules. If this happens, then this happens. This you can do in our application, but then our job is to help you get towards what we call target-based optimization, which is much more customer-centered. And our role is to help you grow through this learning curve. Okay, so that being said, let's start. First question to Guillaume, and we're going to be refocusing now on delivery fees optimization. So when it comes to additional services / delivery fees optimization, what are the major business mechanisms that come into play?
Yes, sure. So first of all, there is definitely price elasticity to play on the delivery fee. And thus the first question we need to start thinking about is, do I want to optimize the price of my service, of my delivery fee as an example, as a standalone, meaning do I want to look after the optimal price of this single item? This is what we can call the standalone price optimization of the service, okay? Example, delivery fee. Or do I want to leverage the double elasticity of the user, of the customer, which is the elasticity related to the product and to the service? The second option is what we call internally multi-product pricing. In both cases, we would still look after the optimal pricing toward the overall performance, but one is focusing on finding the price adjustment only of the service. The second option is focusing on finding the right price for both the product and the service together. Today, we are going to focus on the first option. The second option, the multi-product pricing, will be covered via another webinar later on. So this is the first item that needs to be added, that needs to be thought of. Second, we are clearly splitting, the optimization of the structure of the fare grid of the given service versus the optimization of the pricing of each single layer of this fare grid. So there are really two phases within the optimization of the pricing. There is the optimization of the structure of the grid and the optimization of each single price tier within the fare grid of a given service. And I'd say that the third point is, when we speak about price optimization of a given service, i.e. a delivery fee, there is definitely elasticity, but there is definitely contextualized elasticity. So it's very important to consider that it's very unlikely to reach a static grid that will be optimal forever. The consumer price sensitivity is varying over time, and this overtime evolution is related to the evolution of the context, of the own context that is facing, the seasonality, the competitive practice, your own product offer, the context, the economical context, etc. But also, the optimal fare grid is varying according to your own business objectives. You don't have over time the same business goals, the same business constraints. And lastly, it of course varies according to your own purchasing conditions. So it's very important to look after an optimal fare grid at a given moment, but it's very unlikely that this optimal fare grid is going to be the same forever. So there will be for sure a need of a sort of recurrent reshuffle of your optimal fare grid. So 3 key messages: what are we looking after? The standalone price optimization or a multi-product pricing. Then acknowledging the fact that there will be 2 steps: optimizing the grid and optimizing the price tier of this given grid. And lastly, having in mind that we are going to look after the optimal fare grid that will need a recurrent refreshment in order to consider and leverage the price sensitivity of the consumers that is evolving over time.
Okay, thanks, Guillaume. So I have published, for your information, guys, I have published a first poll question, which is, have you implemented a price optimization process for your additional services? So I will not comment the votes because we have too few right now, but don't forget that you can vote and you can answer, and I will comment a bit later on. Okay. So here we have seen that there are like different ways to do it, but then one of the key things is to optimize on a regular basis, right? Okay, so then Guillaume, how does this price optimization project work with Pricing Up? If we take an example of a client that we worked with recently, could you walk us through the different steps and the different milestones?
Yes, sure. So typically with this client, we were looking after optimizing the delivery pricing tier and pricing fair grid. And so this client was a Kingfisher, to name the brand, it was Castorama in France. And basically we are working on 3 phases. The first step is what we call understand and analyze. The second is experiment, and the third one is decide and implement. Okay, these are really the 3 steps that we are going through with the customers. The first step, understand and analyze current performance. Basically, the objective is to understand what is the current performance of every single granular segment of your end consumer and of your own products. Okay, the idea is to say, let's list all the important KPIs for your own business models. Conversion rate, attachment rate, gross revenue, gross profit, all of this per demand in absolute, etc. Let's have all the relevant KPIs, and let's take a picture of this on a per segment basis. What we call a segment is basically the combination of the dimensions related to products and the dimensions related to end consumer behaviors. To give you some examples, dimensions related to product are supplier name, product brand, subcategory, category, location. But related, and now some dimensions, examples related to the end consumer would be at what time did he request a service? What was the departure day? Was it in a delivery from store? Was it a click and collect? So basically everything that is related to the end consumer behavior. What we are looking after is a differentiation of performance between one segment and another, in order to understand where are we overperforming on one KPI and where are we underperforming on another KPI. It's important to go a little bit further than the operational capabilities. Of course, I can imagine that you could say, okay, I'm not able to price based on the hour of the day or based on the subcategory and so on. But before going through the optimization, it's very important to know where do we have significant room for improvement, and where do we have most of the volume that is driven. Basically, what are the drivers of volume, what are the drivers of profit, and so on. Lastly, within this phase, what we are doing usually is that we are listing all the operational constraints, meaning that we are listing all the constraints that must be considered within the definition of the optimal fair grid that we are going to look after. Okay, what do I mean by this? I mean that there are 3 types of operational constraints. Let's say there is something that we like to call the granular constraints. By granular constraints, we mean how far can we go in the granularity of the optimal fair grid? Do we have constraints in terms of number of tiers? Do we have constraint in terms of type of dimension? Can we play based on the delivery fee hour? Can we play based on the weekday? Can we play based on the category or not? So this is important. The second constraint is usually related to the frequency of the price change. How much can I change my price over time? And the third one is more strategically. Do I have constraints related to the communication of the consumer? Do I want any end consumer to step into a shop and say what will be the cost of my delivery fee, even before he shops, being offline or online? These are what we call constraints, because of course they will be important before we are able to define what we call the iterations, iteration being the type of scenarios that we would test within the second step. So indeed, the second step is what we call the experiment step. This is the steps where we are going to test iteration or scenario of fair grid that seems relevant to us. Before being in a position where we really define the full details of it, it's important to define what do we look after in terms of business goals. Do I look after conversion rate increase at a stable margin? Or do I look after making my service, my delivery fee as much profitable as possible without impacting negatively my conversion? Or do I look after maximizing my overall profit, whatever happens on the profitability of my standalone service, but I look after this and maintaining my conversion flat or my basket value flat? As you can imagine, there are plenty of business goals and business constraints that can be thought of, and this is important to list them before, because we will see at the end that it's unlikely that we will find a scenario I wish so, but it's unlikely that we'll find a scenario that is going to increase every single KPI that you have in your business. So this is the first thing that we need to do. The second is indeed to list the exact type of iteration that we are willing to test. And to do so, the first thing we like to do is let's list all the scenario based on the I believe. We all face the situation where plenty of people have an opinion on pricing, and so within your company, for sure, there are plenty of people who express to yourself, "I believe we should test this price. I believe we should test that price. I believe we should do this and that." Okay, so this is the time where we should list all of them and see if they are at least making sense compared to the first step that we did, which is the static picture analysis. So then once we have this, we can say, okay, this scenario and this scenario seems relevant to test according to the room for improvement that we have identified within the step one. And second, we can define specific scenario of test that seems to address specifically the missed opportunity identified within the static analysis. And then we run the test, which is what we call the experimentation, which consists in making basically a test with a group of tests and a group of control. We'll get back to that later on, and where we are particularly transparent regarding the method in order to avoid to have misinterpretation about the results, because each single method have pros and cons, especially around the margin of error.
Okay, so Guillaume, let me interrupt and recap. I think what is during this experimentation phase, it's super important that you have the freedom or you take the liberty or you make the decision to be able to test something that is different and disruptive, right? So for example, if you have a grid that is organized in terms of, that is mostly cost-based and that is organized in terms of volume, distance to the delivery point, or weight, whatever, then you choose to try and to build a grid based on your basket, basket share and basket levels. So this is something, a new approach that you could test. If you have a cost-based approach where you decide to systematically have the customer pay the price, the full price, or a big part of the cost of your delivery fees, maybe you should consider testing a free shipping option for baskets over than X hundred euros or X an amount of euro. So this is very important that you take this opportunity to test something that is disruptive and test that's something that is new. The other point also you need to consider, you can enter in the equation original dimensions or something that is backed by your business targets. For example, we have a customer that is really into making sure that they have a low environmental impact, and they have decided that if they would optimize the delivery fee, they would take into consideration index of environmental impact for the delivery fee options. And this is something we can factor in the analysis, right? It doesn't have to be only purely P&L type of KPIs. You can add additional KPIs in your decision making, right? Then quickly back to the poll question. So what I have so far, the question was, have you implemented a price optimization process for your additional services? I think 2/3 of the responded said yes on the annual basis and 1/3 on the quarterly basis. So we don't have that many responded, but I think optimizing it on a quarterly basis really makes sense, right? Okay, thanks. Guillaume, go ahead. So the third step now of the methodology.
Yes, the third step is to basically decide on what seemed to be the relevant iteration or not. So it's very important that to analyze the result of each single iteration right after it's finished. Why? Because there is a lot of learnings to take from every single iteration. So usually we are doing a sequence of iteration because we believe that it's relevant to do so, but it's very likely that after the iteration number 2, we are actually going to change the structure of the iteration number 3 based on the learning that we got from the iteration number 1 and 2. Of course, since we are trying to be very transparent on the margin of error existing within any method, then it's important to interpret the results considering this margin of error. And then finally, we are going to recommend what is the optimal fair grid within all what we have tested, according to the initial business goals and business constraints. And so it's important to get this automation, I think, because it allows to get an unbiased definition of what is the optimal fair grid according to what was defined at the beginning. Of course, you have access to the results of every single iteration, and you can decide what is the relevant one. But we believe by experience that it's quite good to have an automatic definition of what was good, what was the best one according to what was initially defined as an objective. And of course, we deploy the most relevant iteration, and we need to repeat the exercise on a regular basis. This regular basis varies over basically two major criteria. One is the seasonality of your own business. And second is the evolution of your own business goals and constraints.
Okay, thanks for Guillaume. So, but there is another element that is very important to be discussed when this happens, right? I think there are two elements. So, at what moment do we have an intervention, and do we work on the cost part of things? First one, and then the second sub question is like, when we do such an optimization, we need to take into account that there's going to be a product mix evolution, and this, I think, it's really worth having a quick check on the product mix evolution.
Yes, absolutely. So on the first step, on the analytical step, let's say, first we are highlighting the profitability, or let's say the segments where the costs of the delivery or the service are really concentrated. So it's interesting to see and to observe, okay, if my product mix would remain as is, I would really need to improve my procurement negotiation on this specific product or these specific segments. However, it's good to not step into the negotiation direct with your own provider, because it's very likely that the different iterations that we are going to do and the optimal fair grid is going to change the product mix. Please believe us, really, it's impressive to see how much the delivery service, for example, is actually having a strong impact on the change of your own product mix. People are elastic to the service, but they are really adapting their behavior in terms of basket content according to the price of the service. And so it's very important to consider the new product mix that you are going to get, considering the new fair grids that you have for your own service, in order to step into a new negotiation with your providers and to leverage really this new product mix to negotiate at the place where you are going to get the highest volume.
Okay, thanks. So I just take the opportunity to give you the answer on the second poll. So the second poll was when you define when you optimize the prices of your additional services, do you do it according to your competition, your costs, or a mix of both? So please vote, and I will comment afterwards. Guillaume, to move on, so what are the KPIs? And I think it's a very important part. What are the KPIs you need to be looking at when you optimize your delivery fees, for example?
Yeah. So of course, every time we are stepping in with a customer, we are defining what are the specific KPIs important for the specific customer. But there are definitely KPIs that are common for everybody. For example, the overall gross profit, the gross profit overall, meaning product and service, isolated but as well together, the overall volume, the volume being expressed as an absolute or conversion rate, the overall gross revenue, the basket value. Basically, these four ones are the major ones. So gross profit, volume, gross revenue, and basket value. These ones are usually the four major ones that need to be looked at in an isolated manner for product and service, as well as in a global manner for the overall business of the customer. Of course, we are adding usually some additional ones that are either specific or that are going deeper within the P&L management of the customer. 3 examples: the variable cost. By variable cost, I mean call center cost or marketing cost or traffic acquisition cost. These type of costs are usually very, very interesting to embed in order to see if we do have an impact on this let's say net profit impact. Another one is the return rate, the loyalty, or another time would be the customer lifetime value. So these are the type of KPIs that we can go deeper on if the customer has a capability to let's say to get the right data for this KPI measurement.
Okay, so this is for the KPIs, but how do you measure the performance and the increments? How do you make a decision that this scenario and this scenario is a good one, and the other one, this iteration, is a bad one?
Well, here we come back to the methods behind. So this is what we call the experimentation method. So this is our preferred method. The experimentation. There are different ways to make, let's say, a test, and the reason why we prefer this method is because it is arguably the one that is checking better the accuracy of the accuracy criteria in terms of measurement. What does it consist in? It consists in having a group of tests and a group of control. Okay, a group where we are not going to proceed with the changes, and a group where we are going to proceed with the changes. Of course, the challenge is to find these two groups and to make sure that the control group is representative enough to the test group. Okay, and this is why I was speaking about margin of error. It's because it's unlikely that we are going to find a control group that is absolutely perfect in terms of representativity with the test group. So this is why there is a bit of margin of error. What is exactly a definition of a group? Well, a definition of a group could be a geographical area, for example. We can say, okay, on this geography, I'm going to do my test. On this geography, I'm not going to do my test. And I know that these two groups behave the same on these KPIs if I were to not do any change. Another definition of two groups would be a time series split. Okay, during this period of time, I'm not going to do a test. Then I'm going to do a test. Then I'm not going to do a test, etc., etc. It could be also consumer group. So basically, we can define different type of group definition according to your own specificity and also pricing capabilities. Usually, with brick and mortars, we work on geography concept and to define the group split. And with e-commerce, we usually work either with a traffic split or with a time series split capability to define the group of test and group of control.
Guillaume, I'm gonna link your comments to a question that Eric just asks, and I think we can answer it right now because it's the right timing. Eric is asking, how long should the test experiment phase last? And it's really related to what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's say that it's difficult to give a generic answer that will be valid for everyone. Why? Because we need to get sufficient volume in order to reach a certain level of confidence. Okay, so of course there are some retailers that are going to reach significant volume and also stability within the performance very quickly. Some others that will need more time. Okay, however, what we can say is that we do have observed a significant change of elasticity within the intra-week and intra-month seasonality. Okay, the reaction to a price on a Monday is usually very different than the reaction to a price on a Saturday, etc., etc. So at least it's important to expose each single weekday, and if possible, the different intra-month seasonality. By intra-month, I mean, for example, there is a payday period where there is a specific season price elasticity, and the non-payday period where there is another specific price elasticity. So usually, it's very good to expose to a given price iteration every single timing dimension that are going to have an impact. So difficult to give a simple answer, but let's say give sufficient time, and the sufficient time needs to be at least 1 week for a given iteration. Ideally a bit more in order to cover the intra-month seasonality.
Yeah, and for example, on Castorama, we did, I think, we did 8 iterations, right? And the optimization was it was split over at least 3 months. But 8 iteration is a lot. We tested a lot of things, but between each iteration, more or less, it was 1 week minimum. Okay, and the hard thing, if you have like a type of pre-post approach, so 1 week of test and 1 week of control group, the key point is really to keep your control groups and save them from any type of third-party activities or external activities on your site, marketing activities. You want to really discuss internally to keep those control weeks as clean as possible. But it's obviously sometimes very complicated. Next question, Guillaume, then, what are the main challenges ahead when we work on optimizing an additional service?
Yeah, there are two categories of challenges, I would say. The client side challenges and the challenges that we have more on our side related to the execution. On the client side, what we have observed is first a philosophical challenge, meaning that we need to make sure that the customer is willing to accept that there will be some failure within the test that we are going to do, and this failure is needed in order to be able to learn. Just gave an example where with a customer we tested 8 different iterations. Of course, the customer we can say confidently that the customer was super happy at the end, but not all the 8 were successful. And actually, we learned as much from the iteration number 2 and 5 that were successful as from the 3 and 4 that was not successful. So it's important to accept that we are the benefits of the experimentation is also in accepting that we are likely to fail for a small period of time, but we are going to fail on a list of KPIs, and we are going to get a lot of learnings towards an optimal price definition. Second one is strategically really important to define what are the important KPIs, and what are the ones that are not important. To accept, usually we need to accept to make some sacrifices on the KPIs that are not that important in order to reach a max performance on the other ones. And operationally, this is a bit linked to what you were saying, Jerome. It's important to identify how easy is the data accessibility, and how easy can we control the non-pricing actions, as the purpose of all of this exercise is to measure the isolated impact of the price change. So it's important to make sure that we can access the right data, as well as we can control the non-pricing actions during this period of time. I'm not saying that you can't do any marketing or promotion action at all, but at least let's try to control them a bit. And the more we can avoid the big actions, the better will be the quality of the outcome. On the execution side, the challenge we have are threefold: preparation of the data, so data cleaning, outliers, and so on. Second one is making sure that the outcome that we are delivering is delivered in a digestible format. For us, there is no point to deliver something that is not understandable, and so we need to make sure that this price elasticity concept and so on is absolutely digestible for you in order to make it actionable, and to make sure that you understand what is the reason why you have this output, and what is the reason why we are delivering this pricing recommendation. And finally, aligning on the methods, on the experimentation method, with the pros and cons of each single small options. It's important, because if we don't have a buy-in, we believe that if you don't have a buy-in of the method, it's unlikely that you'll get a buy-in of the output.
Okay, thanks, Guillaume. We're going to accelerate a bit because for the time management part. Next question is like, how much effort and by whom? So who needs to be involved in such a project, and who's going to spend what type of energy and time?
Okay, let's say on our side we have three types of profile: a data expert, data science, and a pricing expert. You've got on the slide the split over time, and I'd say that on the customer side, we need to get a business owner, someone who really understands the business concept, as well as someone who is able to deliver the right data. And usually we have some hard work on our side to do the preparation of the analysis, the step 1. And then on your side, the work is more on the ability to execute the test based on the protocol that we have defined together. And usually we like to have a sponsor because to implement the final decision, it's really a great tool to get an exec sponsor in order to let's say make the acceptance of the outcome implemented at a global scale.
Yeah. So exec sponsor, BI, somebody from the BI, and we recommend highly to have somebody from the finance control team also. So the data is stamped and the cost is stamped, etc. Very important. Thanks, Guillaume. Next question. So what are the main key success factors when we deliver such an optimization?
The number one is to work together. We are you and us. We are on a mission to find the optimal pricing for this service. So it's one single team, and this success factor is then split over 3 other criteria. One is making sure that we align on the method because the method is going to be the key of everything. Second is being super transparent on all the results. And third is being able to adjust at any point of time. It's basically be flexible on adjusting the different iterations that we are willing to test, because we are going to get constant learning. So work together, align on the methodology, and be flexible on the ability to change the iteration for over time.
Okay, great. So before I go to the last question, which is the most important one. So I'm going back to the poll. So the question was, when you define your prices, the prices of additional services, do you doing it according to your competition, your costs, a mix of both, or another external performance indicator? So a third of the participants said to your competition, a third said a mix of both, and a third said that they're integrated another KPI they want to optimize, conversion rate or attachment. Somebody just answered. So now it's like 50% on optimizing for conversion rate or attachments. So that's great, because I think it's one of the key components. So it's the best way to optimize. Guillaume, the last question and the most important one everybody's going to ask is, what should we expect in terms of business impact? What are the magnitudes of the impacts?
Okay, so we will give you some figures, of course, but bear with us, and we need to tell you that it of course depends on three major factors. One is, what is your current performance, or what is your legacy? Second is, what is the context? Of course, you can imagine that proceeding with tests over a confinement period is not the same as a normal period. And what are your business objectives and your business constraints? Okay, but that being said, there are still three big answers that we can deliver to you. First one is, it's likely to be big in terms of impact, meaning that it's likely that the impact you are going to get are going to be big. Sometimes will be negative, but of course sometimes will be very positive, because the sensitivity of the end consumer on the service fee is really significant. Don't underestimate it. And there are plenty of industries that have started to optimize it. So first learning and experience we have is, impact is going to be big. Second, it's likely that there will be some KPIs that will be really reaching their max, but at the cost of some others. Okay, and of course we can share with you some experience we got, where we had a customer that was really looking after maximizing both KPIs with a little bit in favor of conversion. So we finished by having a pricing grid that really increased the conversion by 50% and increased the margin, the overall profit, by 30%. But all of this was done at a cost. This cost was a basket value decrease in the range of 10%. So this was, of course, the figures are quite impressive, but we didn't came to this after 1, 2, or 3 iterations. It came, as we said, it was really a large number of iterations that led us to this situation. And it was really a common work to adjust constantly, and we were very happy to reach this outcome, of course.
Yeah. And the impact, the figures are huge, but also the volume, and it impacts all your purchases, right? So the total business impact is just massive, and the ROI of optimizing this is huge. So we really recommend that you guys spend time on optimizing your delivery fees, because it's a real topic. Great, thank you, Guillaume. So we are done. Don't underestimate the business impact of those delivery fees. It's massive. Now we're gonna go through the Q&A session. So questions. I do see one question from Markham. Okay, so on top of your hard retail KPIs, so gross margin, gross profit, how would you track consumers related targets or KPIs, such as post-purchase satisfaction, when testing and deciding to move forward? So this is what you commented a bit earlier, Guillaume. So,
yeah, so it's a very interesting question. So we are definitely willing to embed within the measurements any KPI that is relevant for a customer, and of course the post-purchase, so customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, customer repeat rate, and so on. So we can definitely embed this and compare the results between the test and the control group. It's exactly the same. These KPI are exactly the same type, can be measured exactly the same way as the hard KPIs, as you name it. The challenge is, do you have the data? Do you have the data to do this? So I don't know. Do you have NPS data on a per group basis, or do you have the number of calls complained to your call center on a per group basis? So again, the point is more to look after what is the right KPI and what is the KPI for which you have the data to reach this purpose, which is a measure, for example, the post-purchase experience. But once we are collectively able to find this KPI can definitely be exposed to exactly the same type of things, of methods that we just explained. And we are very happy to do so, because the purpose is to maximize the relevant KPIs. So if this KPI is important for you, then we will look after the optimal fair grid according to this KPI.
Okay, thanks, Guillaume. So any other questions? I don't see any additional questions for the moment. Well, if you don't, I have one for you, Guillaume, actually. It's about you mentioned in the introduction about the multi-product pricing approach. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What's the difference between multi-product pricing approach and what we just discussed today?
Yes, sure. So basically, let's imagine you are selling products for your garden, or let's say outside product. Okay, you do have core products and you do have services products, warranty, delivery, and so on. So we can pay attention to optimizing the overall performance by just playing with the price sensitivity of the end consumer on the service itself, or we can look after optimizing the overall performance by playing with both products, price sensitivity, the product and the delivery fee at the same time. So we can definitely look after the fact that a customer can be, for example, very, very price sensitive on the core product. So then we would have a tendency to be very, very competitive there and much less on the other one, or vice versa. So this would be the multi-product approach, will consist in leveraging the double price sensitivity of the end consumer, the one that he has on the product and the one that he has on the service itself, so that we can deliver an optimal price configuration being a mix of a given price for the product and a given price for the service itself. This will be the optimal one. Usually what we recommend is to go first for looking after what is the optimal pricing for product standalone and for service standalone. Once we have established this legacy optimal pricing, let's say, then we can look for the optimal multiple product pricing.
Okay, thanks, Guillaume. So so I have another question from Eric. How often should we do this optimization? So there was a question about, what's how long is going to take, but then how often do we do that? Do we do that once a year, once every 2 years, like most of the people, or more frequently?
Again, difficult to give a generic answer, but I would say that once a year is a bit not frequent enough. Let's say that twice a year sounds a minimum. Why so? Because it depends on two major factors, as we said before. One is what is the seasonality of your business. So typically, if you are in the fashion industry, it's very likely that your winter price sensitivity is very, very different than your summer price sensitivity of your end consumers. Okay, so for sure there is at least two different moments within a year where you need to do this type of exercise. But the second very important criteria is what are the evolution of your own business goals. There could be definitely moments where strategically you are looking after more profit, and some other where you're looking more after volume, and the fair grid is going to be very, very different. So again, there are two different criteria that will drive the answer to that question. One is what is the seasonality of the price sensitivity of your consumer. And we can easily say that it's likely to change within a year. So at least 2 times a year, it sounds important. The second is what is the volatility of your own business goals and business constraints. But all in all, I would say that at least 2 times a year is a must. and more frequent if possible.
Okay, great. So we don't have any more questions. Let me check. I've just asked the final poll question though, which is very important for us. So following this webinar, do you think it would be interesting to implement a price optimization process for additional services? So don't hesitate to answer this. Any other questions? I'm checking in the chat. Yeah, there's Marcom. Yes, we can share the deck. Marcom, you will receive anyway, guys. You will receive the replay of the webinar via email automatically. We can send you a customer success story explaining what we did with the Castorama, and we obviously can share the deck. No problem. No other questions? Let me check. Okay, guys. So let's call it today. Thanks a lot for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email. Here, normally I should have my email address somewhere here. Yeah, don't hesitate to ask any questions. Contact us if you have any pricing challenges. Come to us. We'll be pleased to have a chat with you guys. Thanks a lot. Bye bye. Take care.
Thanks everyone. Thanks a lot.